Did you ever think about those hilarious Christmas moments from the 1980s that would get you in serious trouble today? Back then, holiday chaos was just part of the fun, and nobody questioned whether the things we did were safe. So what made those wild traditions cross the line from funny to forbidden? Riding in the back of pickup trucks to see Christmas lights was one of those wild holiday traditions that felt absolutely normal in the 1980s. Families piled kids, cousins, and neighbors into the open truck bed, threw in some sleeping bags and old blankets, and cruised slowly through neighborhoods while everyone pointed at the brightest displays. The cold December air whipped through hair and reddened cheeks, but nobody cared because the adventure made it worthwhile. Kids scrambled from one side of the truck bed to the other, leaning dangerously over edges to get better looks at impressive light shows. Hot cocoa sloshed in thermoses, carols blared from the cab radio, and the whole experience felt like a carnival ride disguised as a family outing. No one worried about sudden stops or swerving around potholes because the driver's careful attention was all the safety anyone needed. Today, putting children in an open truck bed is illegal in most states, classified as reckless endangerment resulting in fines and license points. What once felt like pure holiday magic is now viewed as a hazard no responsible parent would allow. Letting toddlers tear into gifts wrapped with ribbon and wire was a hilarious Christmas morning spectacle that every family captured on bulky camcorders without a second thought. Those beautiful packages came with curly metallic ribbons, stiff wired bows, and shiny foil edges that made presents look like department store displays. Parents handed these boxes directly to toddlers, laughing as tiny fingers grabbed anything shiny and immediately stuffed it toward waiting mouths. The wired ribbons were especially dangerous, with thin metal cores hidden inside fabric that could scratch skin if a determined toddler chewed through. Some bows had sharp wire stems, and those little spikes disappeared into piles of torn paper where curious hands could easily find them. Kids rolled around in mountains of discarded ribbons, tangling themselves in loops that could tighten unexpectedly. Today, child safety guidelines warn against wired ribbons and small decorative elements near young children due to choking and laceration hazards. What once looked like adorable chaos is now a situation requiring careful supervision and safer wrapping. Leaving kids alone in running cars while parents ran into stores was practically a holiday survival strategy in the 1980s. Parking lots overflowed with frantic shoppers, and dragging 3 kids through a crowded mall just to grab one last gift seemed ridiculous when they could wait comfortably in a warm car with Christmas songs playing on the radio. Parents cracked the window, pointed at the store entrance, and said they would be back in 5 minutes, though 5 often stretched into 20 when checkout lines wrapped around departments. Kids entertained themselves by playing with dashboard buttons, pretending to drive, or fighting over radio stations. Some climbed into the front seat and honked the horn just to see if anyone noticed. The car became a tiny kingdom where siblings negotiated truces and made up games. Nobody called the police, nobody panicked, and parents returned expecting nothing more than mild complaints. Today, leaving a child unattended in a vehicle is illegal in most states, with laws designed to prevent heat stroke and abductions. What parents once considered practical is now classified as child endangerment. Shooting bottle rockets at each other on Christmas Eve was the kind of tradition that made the 1980s feel like the Wild West of holiday celebrations. Families gathered in backyards after dinner, armed with paper bags full of fireworks purchased from roadside stands that asked absolutely no questions about age or intended use. Kids chased each other across frozen lawns, launching bottle rockets from hands, PVC tubes, and empty soda bottles while adults laughed from lawn chairs nearby. The goal was never to actually hit anyone, but the thrill came from how close you could get before your target dove behind a tree. Sparks flew in every direction, and explosions echoed through neighborhoods where other families did exactly the same thing. Singed jacket sleeves and minor burns were treated with snow and shrugged off as part of the fun. Nobody called the fire department unless something actually caught fire. Today, aiming fireworks at people is illegal everywhere, classified as assault with an explosive device in many jurisdictions. The chaos that once defined Christmas Eve is now strictly forbidden. Kids drinking from the shared eggnog ladle at parties was one of those charming moments that made adults smile and reach for cameras in the 1980s. Punch bowls filled with creamy eggnog sat on dining room tables, their sweet cinnamon scent drawing children like magnets. Kids grabbed the communal ladle, took a sip directly from it, made a face at the unusual flavor, and dropped it back into the bowl for the next person. Some double-dipped multiple times throughout the evening, their germs mingling freely with raw eggs and cream sitting at room temperature for hours. That same ladle passed through dozens of hands, touched countless lips, and returned to the bowl after every curious taste. Grandmothers encouraged seconds, while parents chatted in other rooms completely unconcerned. Today, raw egg drinks are heavily discouraged, and communal serving utensils touching mouths horrify health inspectors. Food safety codes now require individual servings and temperature controls that would make traditional eggnog service nearly impossible. What symbolized holiday generosity is now considered a recipe for foodborne illness. Letting children light the Advent wreath candles unsupervised was a cherished December ritual that families trusted completely in the 1980s. Every evening, kids gathered around the dining room table, struck a match or flicked a lighter, and carefully touched flame to each wick while counting down days until Christmas. Parents often watched from the kitchen doorway, pleased their children were learning responsibility. But just as often, parents were busy with dinner, phone calls, or wrapping presents in another room entirely. Children as young as 5 handled matches regularly, learning through trial and error how close was too close. Some families kept the lighter right beside the wreath, accessible to anyone tall enough to reach the table. Near misses with dripping wax and wobbling candles became family jokes rather than warnings. The ritual felt sacred and completely reasonable for children to manage alone. Today, fire safety guidelines prohibit unsupervised minors handling open flames, and many schools have banned candle lighting entirely. What once taught patience is now classified as a preventable fire hazard. Using tinsel made from actual lead on Christmas trees was one of those sparkling traditions nobody questioned in the 1980s, even though danger was woven into every strand. Families draped these heavy metallic icicles across branches with care, admiring how they caught light and transformed trees into shimmering masterpieces. The lead content made tinsel hang perfectly straight, unlike modern plastic versions that clump and tangle. Children helped decorate by tossing handfuls toward the tree, watching strands float down and settle into silver cascades. Little fingers touched tinsel constantly, adjusting placement, pulling loose strands, and sometimes putting those fingers into mouths moments later. Pets batted at dangling icicles and occasionally swallowed pieces. The tinsel stayed on trees for weeks, shedding onto carpets where toddlers crawled and babies explored. By the time scientists connected lead exposure to developmental harm, millions of households had decorated with toxic shimmer for generations. Today, lead tinsel is completely banned, and modern alternatives use plastic or aluminum. What once made trees glow now stands as a reminder of dangers hiding in plain sight. Plugging dozens of light strands into one outlet with no surge protector was standard holiday decorating in the 1980s, and nobody thought twice about the tangled mess of cords behind the tree. Families daisy-chained strand after strand, connecting lights until a single outlet powered enough bulbs to illuminate entire living rooms. Extension cords disappeared under carpets, wrapped around furniture, and stretched across doorways where people tripped without considering unplugging anything. The outlets grew warm to the touch, sometimes hot enough to notice. But warmth was just something electrical things did. Fuses blew regularly during holidays, plunging houses into darkness until someone fumbled to the basement with a flashlight. People replaced fuses with higher amperage versions to prevent inconvenience, never understanding they were disabling safety features protecting walls from fire. Christmas tree fires were common enough that local news covered them every December. Today, electrical codes limit devices per outlet, and surge protectors with automatic shutoffs are essential safety equipment. What seemed like holiday creativity is now recognized as serious fire prevention neglect. Spraying fake snow directly onto windows and mirrors indoors was a decorating tradition that made every room feel like a winter wonderland in the 1980s. Kids loved pressing the nozzle and watching white foam expand across glass surfaces, creating frost patterns and snowdrift scenes in what looked like frozen magic. The cans promised easy cleanup and festive results, so families bought them by the dozen. What nobody mentioned was the chemical cocktail propelling that foam through the air. Aerosol particles drifted far beyond intended targets, settling on furniture, carpets, and lungs. Fumes lingered in poorly ventilated rooms, creating that distinctive chemical sweetness everyone associated with holiday decorating. Kids breathed deeply while perfecting window art, and parents never thought to open windows because cold December air seemed wrong for the season. Some developed headaches after extended decorating sessions but blamed excitement rather than the spray. Today, indoor air quality regulations restrict many aerosol products, and fake snow cans carry prominent ventilation warnings absent decades ago. What transformed windows into showcases is now recognized as an inhalation hazard. Giving kids real chemistry sets as Christmas gifts was considered an investment in future scientists in the 1980s. These elaborate kits contained actual chemicals, glass beakers, test tubes, alcohol burners, and instruction booklets that read like college lab manuals. Kids unwrapped these treasures Christmas morning and immediately wanted to mix, heat, and experiment with substances their parents could not identify. Some sets included powders that stained skin permanently, liquids releasing fumes strong enough to clear rooms, and reactions producing actual flames. Children worked unsupervised in bedrooms and basements, following instructions assuming more caution than any excited kid could maintain. Spills happened constantly, burns occurred occasionally, and small fires broke out in homes where nobody imagined a chemistry set could cause damage. Parents believed educational value outweighed risks, and they survived similar sets themselves. Today, chemistry sets contain heavily restricted substances, eliminate open flames, and include extensive warnings requiring supervision. What fostered scientific curiosity is now regulated to prevent injuries earlier generations simply accepted. Letting kids ride sleds down hills into street traffic was one of those thrilling winter activities that defined childhood in the 1980s. Neighborhoods transformed into unofficial sledding parks whenever snow covered the ground, and the best hills were always the ones that ended uncomfortably close to busy roads where cars passed regularly. Kids launched themselves downhill without helmets, without supervision, and without any real plan for stopping before reaching the asphalt beyond the curb. Parents watched from porches or kitchen windows, trusting that cars would slow down and kids would bail out in time. Some hills dumped sledders directly into intersections where drivers had no warning that a child might suddenly appear from behind a snowbank. The faster you went, the more your friends cheered, and the closer you got to traffic, the bigger the bragging rights became. Near misses were celebrated rather than feared. Today, most communities prohibit sledding on hills ending near roadways, and many areas require designated stop zones far from any traffic. What once felt like innocent winter fun is now recognized as a preventable tragedy. Using real candles on Christmas trees was a tradition that stretched back generations, and families in the 1980s still practiced it with a mixture of reverence and recklessness that seems unimaginable today. The soft glow of actual flames dancing among pine needles created an atmosphere that electric lights simply could not match, no matter how many strands you hung. People clipped small metal holders to branches, inserted white tapered candles, and lit them during special moments like Christmas Eve dinner or opening presents on Christmas morning. The tree became a living thing, flickering and breathing with light that cast moving shadows across walls and ceilings. Children stared in wonder while adults kept buckets of water nearby just in case something went wrong. The scent of warm pine mixed with melting wax created a smell that defined the entire holiday season. Of course, trees dried out as December progressed, turning into kindling that needed only a single spark. Fire departments responded to Christmas tree fires constantly during the holidays, many caused by candles that tipped. Today, real candles on trees are banned by fire codes in most jurisdictions. Throwing tinsel icicles onto power lines for decoration was a neighborhood tradition that sparkled beautifully and endangered everyone who participated without anyone realizing the risks. Kids climbed onto roofs, leaned out of windows, or simply threw handfuls of metallic strands as high as they could, watching them catch on wires and shimmer in the cold winter sun. The effect was magical, transforming ordinary streets into glittering wonderlands where every utility pole became part of the holiday display. Parents encouraged the practice because it cost almost nothing and created impressive results visible from blocks away. What nobody considered was that metallic tinsel draped across electrical wires could create short circuits, power outages, and dangerous arcing that sent sparks showering onto dry lawns. Utility workers dreaded the holiday season because removing tinsel from live wires required specialized equipment. Some neighborhoods experienced blackouts traced directly to overly enthusiastic decorators. Today, placing any conductive material on power lines is illegal and can result in significant fines. The sparkling streets of the 80s exist now only in memories. Kids operating electric carving knives at holiday dinners was considered a rite of passage in the 1980s. A proud moment when children graduated from watching to participating in the most important meal of the year. Fathers handed over the buzzing knife with visible pride, showing sons and daughters how to guide the serrated blade through turkey, ham, or roast beef, while relatives gathered around the table with cameras ready to capture the moment. The electric knife vibrated intensely, requiring a firm grip and steady hand that most children did not actually possess at that age. Slices came out uneven, sometimes dangerously thick, and the blade occasionally slipped toward fingers that had no business being so close to rapidly moving metal. Adults supervised loosely, distracted by conversation, drinks, and the general chaos of holiday gatherings where everyone talked at once. Minor cuts were bandaged quickly and dismissed as learning experiences rather than warning signs. The pride a child felt serving meat they had personally carved outweighed any concern. Today, electric carving knives carry explicit warnings about age restrictions and supervision requirements that keep children away. Leaving alcoholic punch bowls at kid height during parties was simply how holiday entertaining worked in the 1980s, and nobody gave the arrangement a second thought. Crystal bowls filled with spiked eggnog, rum punch, or wine concoctions sat on coffee tables, buffet stations, and kitchen counters where children could easily reach them without stretching or asking for help. Adults assumed kids would taste the alcohol, make a face at the unfamiliar burn, and walk away, which usually happened but not always. Some children developed a taste for sweetened drinks and returned for multiple servings without anyone tracking consumption. The punch looked identical to non-alcoholic versions, and busy hosts rarely noticed which bowl a child ladled from during crowded gatherings. Parties flowed freely between rooms, and supervision was relaxed because everyone knew everyone. Occasionally, a child became obviously intoxicated, creating awkward moments handled quietly and never reported outside the family. Today, serving alcohol where minors can access it constitutes negligent hosting in most states, and homeowners face legal consequences if underage drinking occurs at their parties. Letting babies chew on painted wooden ornaments was a Christmas tradition passed down through generations in the 1980s, with heirloom decorations making their way into tiny mouths year after year. Grandmothers proudly displayed hand-painted wooden Santas, angels, and snowmen that their own children had gnawed on decades earlier. The ornaments dangled from low branches specifically so babies could reach them, and the chewing was seen as adorable rather than concerning. Nobody thought about what kind of paint coated those vintage decorations or whether the finish contained lead, which was common in older paints. Babies sucked on ornaments during family photos. Teething toddlers carried them around the house, and the decorations showed tooth marks that families treasured as signs of continued tradition. The paint flaked slowly, depositing chips that disappeared into mouths and digestive systems without anyone noticing. Today, lead paint regulations prohibit its use on any item intended for children, and vintage ornaments are specifically identified as hazards that should never be accessible to infants. Kids sitting on mall Santa's lap without any background checks for performers was the unchallenged norm of the 1980s, a tradition nobody thought to question. Department stores hired seasonal Santas through newspaper classified ads, brief interviews, and costume fittings that focused entirely on appearance and jolly demeanor rather than qualifications or history. Parents lined up eagerly, trusting that anyone wearing the red suit deserved access to their children for photographs and whispered wish lists. Kids climbed onto laps, whispered wishes into ears, posed for photos, and sometimes spent extended moments with complete strangers whose backgrounds were never verified by anyone. The magic of the experience depended on believing Santa was safe simply because he represented something magical. Mall management cared about lines moving quickly and photo packages selling briskly, not about who wore the beard. Children sometimes reported feeling uncomfortable, but concerns were dismissed as shyness. Today, any performer interacting with children must undergo background checks, and many venues require additional training, supervision, and protocols. Using bubble lights with exposed hot glass tubes was a mesmerizing holiday tradition that captivated children throughout the 1980s. These decorations featured small glass vials filled with colored liquid that bubbled continuously when heated by the bulb beneath them. Kids pressed their faces close to watch the hypnotic motion, sometimes touching the tubes to feel how warm they had become. The glass grew hot enough to burn skin on contact, and the liquid inside could cause irritation if a tube cracked and leaked. Parents placed these lights on trees within easy reach because the bubbling effect was the whole point, and hiding them high on the tree defeated their purpose. Children learned through painful experience which lights were safe to touch and which would leave red marks on fingertips. The tubes were fragile and broke easily when bumped, handled, or packed carelessly between seasons. Today, bubble lights are redesigned with protective covers and lower operating temperatures, and vintage versions carry warnings about burn risks and breakage hazards. The magical bubbling remains, but the danger has been engineered away. Letting kids handle dry ice for punch bowl effects was a spectacular party trick that parents trusted children to manage in the 1980s. Blocks of frozen carbon dioxide created dramatic fog that cascaded over punch bowl edges, transforming ordinary drinks into mysterious potions from science fiction movies. Kids begged to drop the chunks into liquid themselves, watching the violent bubbling and billowing mist with pure fascination. Adults explained that dry ice was very cold and should not be touched for long, then handed pieces directly to children who immediately forgot the warning. Bare fingers gripped the smoking blocks, and the burning cold registered too late to prevent blisters and frostbite damage. Some children tried to taste the fog or put small pieces in their mouths, not understanding that negative temperatures could injure tissue instantly. Emergency room visits spiked during holiday party season, with dry ice injuries appearing regularly among the cases. Today, dry ice comes with explicit warnings about skin contact, and responsible adults handle it exclusively with insulated gloves while keeping children at safe distances. Spraying aerosol flocking inside the house without ventilation was how families created snow-covered Christmas trees in the 1980s. The cans released thick white foam that settled onto branches, transforming green pines into frosted fantasies straight from holiday cards. People closed windows to keep the flocking from blowing around, never considering that they were trapping chemical fumes inside rooms where everyone breathed. The spray required multiple coats, meaning exposure continued for hours as families perfected their artificial snowfall. Kids helped enthusiastically, pressing nozzles and directing streams while standing directly in the chemical cloud. The distinctive smell became associated with Christmas preparation, though that smell indicated volatile compounds entering lungs with every breath. Some people reported headaches or nausea, but attributed symptoms to holiday excitement. Today, flocking products carry explicit ventilation requirements and respiratory warnings, and professional services handle application with protective equipment. What once seemed like harmless decorating is now recognized as hazardous chemical exposure. Giving kids realistic toy guns as Christmas presents was one of the most exciting gifts a child could unwrap in the 1980s. These replicas looked almost identical to real firearms, with detailed metal parts, realistic weight, and mechanisms that clicked just like the weapons they imitated. Boys ran through neighborhoods pointing these toys at friends, strangers, and passing cars, without anyone considering how dangerous the confusion could become. Parents bought them proudly, believing they encouraged imaginative play and outdoor adventure. Toy stores displayed them alongside cap guns and water pistols, making no distinction between harmless fun and potential tragedy. Police officers responding to calls had no way to distinguish a child with a toy from an actual threat. The lack of bright orange tips meant every realistic toy gun was a potential crisis waiting to happen. Today, federal regulations require obvious safety markings on all toy firearms, and many jurisdictions ban realistic replicas entirely. What once filled stockings is now recognized as a serious public safety concern that put children and first responders at unnecessary risk. Letting children play with electric train sets unsupervised was a Christmas morning tradition that parents trusted completely in the 1980s. These elaborate setups featured metal tracks, powerful transformers, and intricate locomotives that heated up during extended operation. Kids spent hours alone in basements and bedrooms, adjusting track layouts, increasing transformer speeds, and watching trains race around curves until wheels glowed warm from friction. The transformers themselves generated significant heat and electrical current that could shock small fingers poking into the wrong places. Derailments sent heavy metal cars flying across rooms, and sharp track edges left cuts on hands crawling across layouts. Some children discovered that touching the tracks while the transformer was running produced a memorable jolt. Parents assumed the toys were safe because they came in festive boxes with pictures of happy families, never reading warnings buried in instruction manuals. Today, electric train sets carry explicit supervision requirements, and modern designs include automatic shutoffs and lower voltage systems that reduce burn and shock risks significantly. Using angel hair fiberglass as tree decoration was a sparkling tradition that made Christmas trees look like they were wrapped in delicate clouds of spun sugar throughout the 1980s. Families pulled apart sheets of this fluffy white material and draped it across branches, creating a snowy effect that photographs beautifully but felt terrible on skin. The fibers were actually tiny strands of glass that embedded themselves in fingers, arms, and faces during decorating sessions. Kids loved handling the soft-looking material, pressing it against cheeks or tossing handfuls into the air, unaware that microscopic splinters were working into their skin. The itching started hours later and lasted for days, with some children developing rashes that required medical attention. Breathing near the material sent invisible particles into lungs, where they caused irritation that nobody connected to the innocent-looking decoration. Today, angel hair fiberglass has been replaced with safer synthetic alternatives, and vintage packages carry explicit warnings about skin and respiratory hazards that earlier generations never saw. Kids eating raw cookie dough while baking with grandma was one of those sacred Christmas traditions that nobody questioned in the 1980s. The mixing bowl came out, ingredients combined into sweet, buttery perfection, and children immediately began sneaking spoonfuls before a single cookie reached the oven. Grandmothers smiled and looked away, remembering doing exactly the same thing in their own childhoods. Raw eggs mixed with flour, sugar, and vanilla created a taste that somehow surpassed the finished product, and every family had their own recipe for dough that never quite made it to the baking sheet. Some kids ate so much dough they felt sick before dinner, blaming the sugar rather than the uncooked eggs multiplying bacteria in their stomachs. Nobody discussed salmonella or food safety because the tradition predated widespread awareness of these risks. Today, food safety guidelines specifically warn against consuming raw eggs, and commercial cookie dough is reformulated to be safe for eating unbaked. What grandmothers taught their grandchildren is now officially discouraged by health authorities everywhere. Lawn darts, as a Christmas gift for the whole family, represented the pinnacle of outdoor entertainment in the 1980s. These heavy metal projectiles with pointed tips flew through the air toward plastic rings, and the satisfying thunk of a dart embedding itself in frozen ground made the game irresistible. Kids threw them as hard as they could, competed to see who could launch them highest, and occasionally aimed at siblings who were supposed to be watching for incoming darts. The weighted metal tips could puncture skin, crack skulls, and cause injuries that turned backyard games into emergency room visits. Parents supervised casually from lawn chairs, trusting children to follow rules that became suggestions the moment adults looked away. The darts were heavy enough to cause serious damage from almost any distance, and their unpredictable flight paths meant safety zones were theoretical. After multiple child fatalities were traced directly to lawn dart injuries, federal regulators banned the sale of these toys nationwide. Today, lawn darts remain illegal, and the cheerful boxes that once sat under Christmas trees serve as reminders of an era when dangerous toys were part of growing up. Cutting down a Christmas tree from public land was one of those bold, adventurous family outings that made the holidays feel like something out of a classic American story. Parents would pack everyone into the car, drive out to a wooded area or a quiet clearing, and pick the perfect tree with nothing but excitement guiding them. Kids loved the idea of choosing a tree that nobody else had touched, one that looked wild and authentic and worthy of being the centerpiece of the living room. The crunch of snow, the cold air, and the thrill of the hunt made the whole day unforgettable. Back then, few people worried about permits or restrictions, especially in rural areas where land boundaries blurred and tradition spoke louder than rules. Today, though, cutting a tree from public land without permission is a criminal offense. Forestry regulations protect natural habitats, and conservation laws control how many trees can be removed each season. The adventure that once felt wholesome and free now comes with fines, penalties, and sometimes even court involvement. It shows just how much the world has changed. What families once saw as bonding time in nature is now something you need paperwork to do. But the memories remain as crisp as the winter air that once filled those stolen forests. Asbestos snow blankets for tree skirts were considered the height of holiday elegance in the 1980s, spreading across floors beneath decorated trees like freshly fallen powder. These fluffy white sheets looked impossibly realistic, creating that perfect winter scene families saw in department store windows. Parents carefully arranged them each December, tucking the edges around tree stands and piling wrapped gifts on top as if presents had landed in fresh snow. Nobody suspected that the fibers making the blankets so soft and flame-resistant were the same ones doctors would later connect to devastating lung diseases. Children crawled across them reaching for presents, pets napped on their surfaces, and vacuum cleaners stirred up invisible clouds every time someone tidied the living room. The asbestos fibers did not announce themselves with smell or texture. They simply drifted into the air and settled into lungs where they remained for decades. When health authorities recognized the danger, blankets were pulled from shelves and homes were urged to dispose of them carefully. What once symbolized cozy holiday perfection became a chilling reminder that comfort can carry invisible costs. Asbestos snow blankets beneath the tree were a decorating staple that families trusted completely in the 1980s, despite warnings that had already begun circulating in other industries. These fluffy white sheets mimicked fresh snowfall so convincingly that people spread them under trees, across windowsills, and around elaborate holiday displays without ever questioning what made them so perfectly fireproof. The material felt soft, looked pristine, and solved the problem of bare tree stands in the most elegant way possible. What families did not understand was that asbestos fibers become dangerous the moment they are disturbed, releasing particles that lodge permanently in lung tissue. Every time someone adjusted the blanket or packed decorations away, invisible contamination drifted through the room. Children crawled across these blankets to reach presents on Christmas morning, pressing their faces close without any idea of the risk. It took decades of medical research before the scope of asbestos exposure became undeniable. By then, countless holiday memories had been built on a foundation that was quietly causing harm with every breath. Children participating in live nativity scenes with real animals was a cherished holiday experience in the 1970s. Schools and churches would gather goats, donkeys, sheep, or even small calves, placing them in straw-lined corners while children in robes acted out the story of the nativity. The animals brayed, shifted, or occasionally caused chaos, but everyone loved it. There was something magical about sharing the stage with creatures that felt straight out of the story itself. Children learned gentleness and patience in ways no classroom lesson could teach, and the unpredictability of the animals made every performance feel alive. Parents watched proudly, cameras in hand, capturing moments that felt sacred in their simplicity. But today, safety and liability laws make this nearly impossible. Real animals require permits, supervision, insurance, and strict handling rules. Most places do not attempt it anymore. The warmth of those live scenes has been replaced by cardboard props or digital projections. Yet anyone old enough to remember those nights can still smell the hay and hear the soft bleats that completed the scene. The skip it was supposed to be harmless fun, a simple plastic ring around your ankle connected to a ball that spun as you jumped. The goal was to skip over it without tripping, counting rotations with each pass. It was the kind of toy that looked safe until it was not. Every playground had that one kid who took it too far, turning the skip it into a competitive sport. The plastic ball would smack the pavement like a drum, echoing across recess while lines of kids waited for their turn. It was all fun until someone missed a jump, tripped, and landed hard, usually to the sound of laughter before the nurse was called. The hard plastic ball could easily clip ankles, shins, or even teeth if things went wrong. Many kids learned the pain of getting tangled mid-swing, tumbling onto the pavement in tears. Despite the bruises, it became a playground favorite, with competitions to see who could skip it the longest. Teachers grew tired of the chaos, and some schools banned it outright. Still, its catchy jingle and simple design made it unforgettable. The skip it may have been dangerous, but it was also pure 1980s energy, loud, competitive, and just a little bit reckless. Clacker balls as the must-have stocking stuffer were a sensation that swept through the 1980s with the kind of intensity only toys can generate. These acrylic spheres, attached by a string and meant to bang together in a hypnotic rhythm, showed up under Christmas trees in homes that had no idea what chaos they were unwrapping. Kids loved the satisfying crack of the balls colliding, the way mastering the rhythm felt like unlocking a secret skill. What nobody anticipated was the force those collisions produced. The acrylic shattered without warning, sending sharp fragments flying toward faces and hands that had been swinging the toy moments before. Emergency rooms filled with children clutching bleeding fingers and crying about their favorite gift. Parents who thought they were giving harmless fun found themselves rushing to hospitals on Christmas afternoon. Manufacturers tried reinforcing the design, but complaints kept coming, and the toy disappeared from shelves almost as quickly as it had arrived. Today, clacker balls are remembered with nostalgia and disbelief, a reminder that exciting gifts are not always safe ones. Bubble lights with methylene chloride fluid were absolutely mesmerizing to children in the 1980s, their colorful tubes gurgling and bubbling as the heat from tiny bulbs brought the mysterious liquid inside to life. Families clipped them onto tree branches and watched the little towers of light dance with movement that seemed magical compared to ordinary static bulbs. Kids pressed their faces close, hypnotized by the rising bubbles that looked like tiny celebrations happening inside each glass tube. The colors glowed warmly, casting reflections across ornaments and tinsel while filling living rooms with that unmistakable holiday atmosphere everyone craved. What nobody realized was that the liquid creating those beautiful bubbles contained methylene chloride, a chemical capable of causing serious harm if the glass cracked or shattered. Parents placed these lights within easy reach of curious hands, never imagining that a broken tube could release dangerous vapors. When researchers documented the risks and regulators intervened, the charming bubble lights of childhood became cautionary examples of how enchanting designs can mask genuine hazards. Using asbestos-based fake snow for decor sounds unthinkable today. But in the 1970s, it was still floating around in attics, storage boxes, and leftover holiday supplies from even earlier decades. Families sprinkled it across mantles, nativity scenes, and Christmas village displays without a hint of hesitation because it looked stunningly real. It clung beautifully, stayed in place, and made every surface look winter-kissed even if the weather outside refused to cooperate. Most people never imagined that the soft white powder carried risks far beyond messiness. The word asbestos simply did not trigger panic yet, at least not in the way it does today. Back then, you were more focused on making your holiday decor look as magical as possible, especially if you were working on a budget and wanted your home to feel special. Today, possession or use of anything containing asbestos can bring legal trouble, health warnings, and removal orders. It is one of those dramatic shifts where science taught us something we wish we had known earlier. But when people look back at old photos, they do not remember the danger. They remember the tiny hillside of white powder beneath the ceramic houses, the shimmer on the mantel, and how perfectly it tied the whole scene together. Flammable celluloid decoration figurines stood on mantels and windowsills throughout the 1980s, their detailed features and translucent glow making them favorites among collectors and casual decorators. Families displayed delicate Santas, angels, and nativity figures near candles and warm light bulbs, admiring how the thin materials seemed to glow from within. Children loved examining the intricate details molded into each piece, handling them carefully because they seemed precious. What nobody realized was that celluloid, one of the earliest plastics, was essentially solidified nitrocellulose that could ignite with startling speed. A figurine placed too close to a candle or hot bulb could burst into fire within seconds, burning so rapidly that reaction was impossible. Families who arranged these decorations near heat sources unknowingly created fire hazards. When fire investigations traced holiday blazes back to these figurines, regulations ended their production. The delicate beauty that graced displays became a symbol of how flammable materials infiltrated homes during an era of limited safety testing. Baby walkers as the perfect gift for new parents were advertised throughout the 1980s as developmental miracles that would help infants learn to walk faster and more confidently. Grandparents bought them proudly, imagining their newest family members zooming across living room floors with delighted giggles. The contraptions looked sturdy enough, with plastic seats suspended inside wheeled frames that let babies push themselves around before they could stand. What nobody anticipated was the speed these walkers could reach on smooth surfaces or the momentum they built heading toward staircases and open doorways. Babies toppled downstairs, still strapped into their seats, crashed into furniture hard enough to cause head injuries, and reached countertops where hot liquids waited. Emergency rooms documented thousands of injuries each year, many severe enough to require hospitalization. Parents who thought they were giving their children an advantage were instead introducing one of the most dangerous pieces of baby equipment ever mass-produced. When studies finally confirmed what hospitals had been seeing, regulations tightened and designs changed dramatically. Trichloroethylene-cleaned ornament sets filled store shelves in the 1980s, their gleaming surfaces reflecting the promise of perfect holiday displays. Manufacturers used this powerful industrial solvent to remove oils and residue from mass-produced ornaments before packaging, leaving that flawless shine customers expected. Families unpacked boxes each December, handling pieces that still carried traces of the cleaning chemical in tiny surface imperfections. The solvent evaporated slowly at room temperature, releasing fumes that accumulated in closed storage boxes and drifted into living rooms once ornaments hung on heated trees. Children who helped unpack decorations breathed concentrated vapors from freshly opened boxes without recognizing the smell as dangerous. Parents arranged these gleaming spheres on branches, never suspecting the perfect shine came with invisible health costs. When researchers linked trichloroethylene to liver damage and cancer, manufacturers switched to safer methods. The pristine ornaments that represented holiday perfection became examples of how industrial shortcuts entered family homes. Driving home. Christmas trees on car roofs without tying them properly was almost a holiday sport in the 1970s. Families would buy a tree that was always 2 feet taller than the living room allowed, hoist it onto the roof by sheer force of will, and toss 1 or 2 loops of twine over it with a confidence that probably came from nowhere rational. The wind would whip through the branches as the car pulled onto the road, and everyone inside held their breath just a little, watching for any sudden wobble. Nobody thought about fines or traffic violations or the possibility of the tree tumbling dramatically into the street. It was just part of the adventure, part of the ritual of getting that perfect pine safely home. Today, though, even slightly unsecured loads can earn you a ticket on the spot. Highways and city streets have become strict zones of compliance, leaving no room for the messy charm of trial and error. But the memory of those rides home, filled with laughter and the smell of fresh pine creeping into the car, remains untouchable. The toy chemistry sets of the 1980s were not the watered-down, safe versions you see today. Back then, they were miniature laboratories filled with real acids, flammable powders, and unmarked mystery chemicals. For a generation raised on curiosity and chaos, they were irresistible. Kitchens turned into science labs and basements filled with smoke as kids tested experiments that often went wrong. Parents discovered scorched countertops, blackened test tubes, and half-melted spoons left behind in the name of science. Some kids proudly created small explosions, convinced they were future geniuses, while their mothers screamed from upstairs to stop making that smell. Kids mixed, boiled, and ignited all sorts of concoctions, often inside their bedrooms. Instructions encouraged experimentation, sometimes even hinting at reactions that produced fire or smoke. The danger was part of the appeal. There were countless reports of burns, ruined carpets, and explosions that sent families running for the garden hose. Yet these kits also inspired many future scientists who credit those reckless experiments for sparking their curiosity. Eventually, regulations forced toy makers to strip the sets of anything remotely hazardous, turning them into safe but boring science light boxes. The old chemistry sets may have been risky, but for the daring kids of the 1980s, they were proof that discovery often came with a little danger and a lot of smoke. Cap guns that produced real sparks and smoke were among the most coveted Christmas presents for children in the 1980s, promising hours of backyard battles and imaginary showdowns. These metal replicas fired paper caps that cracked with a sound loud enough to startle neighbors and produced tiny bursts of flame visible in dim light. Kids loved the authenticity, the weight of the metal in their hands, and the smell of gunpowder that lingered on their fingers after a full roll of caps had been fired. Parents saw them as harmless toys, the same kind they had played with during their own childhoods, and handed them over without much thought about what could go wrong. But caps jammed, barrels overheated, and curious fingers poked into chambers still hot from the last shot. Burns were common, and the sparks occasionally caught on dry leaves or clothing during summer battles that continued into the holiday break. The noise alone caused hearing damage in children who fired them too close to their own ears. When safety advocates finally examined these toys closely, the findings were enough to transform an entire industry, replacing metal with plastic and real sparks with electronic sounds. Lead crystal hanging prisms dangled from chandeliers and Christmas trees throughout the 1980s, their faceted surfaces splitting light into rainbow cascades that danced across walls and ceilings. Families treasured these elegant decorations, often receiving them as gifts or inheriting them from relatives who appreciated fine crystal craftsmanship. Children loved watching the colors shift and swirl whenever someone walked past or a breeze caught the dangling prisms. The crystal that made these rainbows so vivid contained lead oxide, which gave the glass its exceptional clarity and weight. Over time, especially in homes with varying humidity, the lead slowly migrated to the surface where it transferred onto hands during handling. Families who polished their prisms regularly absorbed more lead with every cleaning session. When scientists documented how lead crystal released toxic metal through normal use, warnings spread quickly through decorating communities. The dancing rainbows that elevated holiday decor now carry cautions about display and keeping them away from curious children. Glass ornament string lights that overheated were practically the heartbeat of Christmas decor in the 1970s. When you plugged them in, the whole house lit up with colors that felt warm, deep, and slightly dramatic, something modern LED lights never quite managed to recreate. The bulbs were thick and glossy, the kind you could tap lightly and hear a tiny clink as if they were miniature ornaments in their own right. Every family had at least one set, sometimes passed down from older relatives who swore by their glow. Of course, those bulbs burned hot enough to toast your fingers if you held them too long, but that was part of the charm. You learned to respect them the same way you respected stovetops or ovens. Today, though, anything that overheats even slightly is pulled off the shelves before it ever reaches a living room. Modern electrical codes ban lights with certain wiring thickness and heat output, and anything with a glass bulb is quietly pushed into the category of retro danger. But those lights had personality. They flickered softly, they hummed ever so slightly, and when one bulb went out, the entire string went dark, sending the family into a comedic treasure hunt to find the culprit. That memory stays warm in a way the lights never did. Shrinky Dinks were marketed as a harmless art project, a way for kids to draw, color, and then watch their creations magically shrink into hard plastic charms. What no one mentioned at first was that the original versions came with serious hazards. Early Shrinky Dinks required baking in standard home ovens, and as they heated, they released fumes from the plastic sheets that were far from healthy. Kids often pressed their faces close to the oven door, noses nearly touching the glass, to watch their designs twist and curl like magic. The transformation was hypnotic, bright markers darkening, edges curling, and colors deepening into perfect little trinkets. For a few glorious minutes, the entire kitchen smelled like excitement and chemical vapor, and no one thought twice about it. The smell was sharp and unmistakable, filling kitchens with a chemical tang that left many parents concerned. Kids huddled around the oven door to watch the transformation, unaware that they were breathing in harmful gases. While no major disasters were widely reported, growing concern about fumes and burns forced manufacturers to redesign the product with safer materials and methods. Despite the risk, Shrinky Dinks became an icon of 1980s crafting, a mix of creativity, danger, and instant gratification. The thrill of watching your artwork warp, curl, and harden into something permanent was unforgettable, even if it came with a dose of toxic nostalgia. Indoor smoking during Christmas dinner was so ordinary in the 1980s that most families never even noticed it happening. Uncles lit cigarettes between bites of turkey, grandmothers puffed quietly in the corner while watching children unwrap presents, and ashtrays sat on dining tables like another piece of holiday decor. The haze that filled living rooms felt festive rather than dangerous, a soft blur that made the tree lights glow warmer and the conversations drift more easily. Children breathed it in without complaint because it was simply the air of celebration, the scent of family gatherings that happened year after year without question. Nobody opened windows in December, and nobody asked smokers to step outside into the cold. The idea of secondhand smoke as a health risk had not yet reached the urgency it would later carry, and families assumed that whatever harm existed was too small to matter. It took years of research, public campaigns, and shifting attitudes before the smoke finally cleared from holiday gatherings. Today, the thought of lighting up at the dinner table feels almost unthinkable, but for an entire generation, it was as natural as passing the gravy. Crystalline asbestos glitter sparkled across countless Christmas decorations in the 1980s, adding shimmer to everything from homemade ornaments to store-bought wreaths. Families shook the fine powder over glue-covered surfaces, watching it catch light and transform ordinary crafts into dazzling holiday creations. Children loved the sparkle, often helping to apply the glitter with bare hands and blowing away excess without concern for what they might inhale. The crystalline structure that made this glitter brilliant came from processed asbestos fibers, ground fine enough to look like innocent craft supplies. Every shake of the container released microscopic particles that floated through the air and settled into lungs where they remained for decades. Families who made ornaments together were unknowingly sharing exposure to dangerous materials. When health officials connected craft glitter to asbestos-related diseases, the products were pulled from stores immediately. The sparkle that made holiday projects feel special became a haunting reminder of how danger hides inside innocent traditions. Unventilated indoor Christmas tree flocking was something that families approached with excitement instead of fear. In the 1970s, grabbing a can of artificial snow and coating the tree right in the middle of the living room felt like the best way to turn your home into a snowy postcard scene. Kids would gather around just to watch the powder fall onto the branches, building up that soft, white layer that made everything feel instantly festive. The smell, the sound, the little cloud that puffed up with every spray all felt like part of the fun. No one opened windows or wore masks or worried about what they were breathing in. The chemicals were just part of the magic, even if nobody knew it then. Today, though, this is the kind of thing that would get you in trouble faster than you could shake the can. Safety codes require ventilation, protective gear, or outright ban certain types of flocking materials. People talk about air quality and respiratory risks and things that were not even part of the vocabulary in the 1970s. Maybe it is for the best, but it is impossible to deny that the old way felt more enchanting. When you see old photos covered in that soft, snowy coating, you can almost smell the faint sweetness of the artificial snow and remember how proud everyone was of the winter scene they had created indoors. The Easy Bake Oven of the 1980s felt like pure independence in a box. With a tiny light bulb acting as the heat source, kids could bake small cakes and cookies all by themselves. It was marketed as a way to feel grown up, and it worked, maybe too well. Many kids used the oven to experiment, tossing in candy bars, crayons, or whatever was in the pantry just to see what would happen. The smell that filled the room was equal parts sugar and smoke, and parents would come running only to find melted chaos inside. Some kids even charged friends a few cents to taste test their creations, proudly serving up burned chocolate and half-cooked dough. The problem was those little ovens could get dangerously hot. Thousands of children burned their fingers or hands trying to pull out the metal pans, and some even ended up with serious blisters. There were no automatic shutoffs, and the compact design trapped heat in ways no one expected. Parents quickly realized the toy was more hazard than hobby. Later versions introduced safety doors and cooler heating elements, but by then, the damage to its reputation was done. The 1980s model still holds a nostalgic place in many hearts, but it also taught an entire generation a hard lesson. Sometimes being just like mom comes with a price. Chemistry sets with real acids and flammable powders were the gifts that made children feel like genuine scientists on Christmas morning throughout the 1980s. These kits came packed with glass beakers, test tubes, alcohol burners, and chemicals potent enough to create reactions that bubbled, smoked, and occasionally exploded when mixed incorrectly. Parents loved the educational appeal, imagining their children growing up to become doctors or researchers, never pausing to consider what might happen when curiosity outpaced caution. Kids followed instructions loosely, if at all, mixing compounds to see what would happen rather than why. The sulfur smelled like rotten eggs, the acids ate through fabric, and the flames licked dangerously close to bedroom curtains. Some experiments required heating substances until they changed color, and the line between success and disaster was often invisible. When injuries mounted and chemical burns filled emergency rooms, manufacturers began stripping the most dangerous components from their kits. Today, chemistry sets contain little more than baking soda and vinegar, a far cry from the miniature laboratories that once turned bedrooms into hazardous research stations. Radium-painted glow-in-the-dark ornaments fascinated children in the 1980s, their eerie green luminescence making Christmas trees visible even after the lights went out. Families displayed these ornaments proudly, watching them absorb light during the day and release it slowly through the night like tiny captured stars. Kids would turn off all the lights to see which ornaments glowed brightest, pressing their faces close to watch the soft radiance. What nobody understood was that the glow came from radium, a radioactive element used in watch dials before its dangers became widely known. These ornaments continued circulating through craft fairs and antique shops, passed between families who had no idea they were handling radioactive material. Every moment spent near these glowing treasures meant exposure to radiation that accumulated silently. When nuclear safety regulations caught up with consumer products, these ornaments were classified as hazardous waste. The magical glow that made bedrooms feel enchanted now represents one of the most unsettling discoveries about holiday decorations. Community bonfires using unregulated materials were another festive tradition that belonged to a different world entirely. You would see families tossing in scraps of old fencing, broken furniture, untreated wood, and sometimes even boxes or paper left over from the holiday madness. The bonfire would roar to life, sending sparks spiraling into the winter air like fireflies trying to escape the heat. People gathered around with warm drinks, shared stories, and treated it as a way to come together when the weather tried to push everyone apart. Nobody checked whether the materials were safe to burn. Nobody asked about air quality. It was simply a tradition born from practicality and a desire to be together. Today, though, burning anything other than clean, approved wood is illegal. Environmental regulations forbid the release of toxic fumes, and burning household materials can result in fines or even legal action. It is a reminder that the world has grown more cautious and more regulated. But the memory of standing around a roaring fire, bundled up and laughing with neighbors, is something no law can erase. Before you go, tell us which band 80s tradition made you laugh or cringe the most. Tap like if this brought back memories, and subscribe so you never miss another trip into the hilarious chaos we somehow survived.